Science fiction largely divides into two traditions. There is this Frankensteinian inspired science fiction that is full of anxiety and which is called cyberpunk, and it was prepared by Isaac Asimov and Philip Dick, and then properly launched by William Gibson in his New Romancer. Then there is the utopian current of techno-solutionism, which is rooted in the futurism of the 1950s and which can be called retrofuturism. I believe that this divide parallels the distinction between two kinds of materials, concrete and plastic. It becomes clear when we approach cyberpunk through brutalism. The architectural current of brutalism emerged alongside cyberpunk. In cyberpunk films, we see many rough concrete surfaces. Brutalism is a kind of proto-cyberpunk architecture. Cyberpunk opposes the bright, technicized future that American science fiction depicted in the 1930s and 1940s. Magazines such as Amazing Stories and Astounding Science Fiction, which were still influenced by Russian and Italian futurism, established the aesthetic vocabulary of Star Trek that came out in 1966. Star Trek created the space-age visual language that was going to dominate the genre for decades. In essence, it was a plastic aesthetic. Plastic was often cast as a material of progress in the 20th century. Percy Marx coined the term plastic age to describe the post-World War I era. What is cyberpunk? Cyberpunk is set in a dystopian future featuring futuristic technology in claustrophobic urban environments, combined with narratives of collapse and decay. But it is not reducible to dystopia alone. If we take them together, cyberpunk and brutalism articulate an ironic critique of that earlier failed economic and aesthetic paradigms called plastic modernity. Some are now seeking to revive that old modernity. There are affinities between brutalism and cyberpunk, and in this book I set them against the plastic philosophy of the 20th century and its afterlife that takes place in the retrofuturism of the 21st century. Intuitively, plastic can be perceived as modern and future-oriented. Yet today's plastic modernity is the futurism of the past. It embodies the bright, colorful optimism of the oil age. Right at the start of his second term, Trump reversed the gradual plastic straw ban introduced by Biden, recasting paper straws as liberal. He also immediately slashed the environmental rules for the plastic industry. When Trump decorated the Oval Office fireplace with ornate athletes, social media critics quickly found that the decorations resemble polyurethane moldings sold on the Home Depot website. Trump denied this. Retrofuturists are plastic people, oriented towards the imaginary of the oil age. They have become increasingly visible. Plastic retrofuturism is aligned with Trumpism and a whole slew of tech overlords and media oligarchs who want to build artificial cities on other planets and who have signed up for cryogenic freezing to continue life after death in plasticized bodies. What is brutalism? Brutalist architecture emerged in the 1950s when popular optimistic futurism was at its height. Brutalism wanted to strip away the smooth forms of early modern design. Cyberpunk does the same. Cyberpunk does not stage luminous plastic environments but presents somber atmospheres. Over the course of the 20th century, concrete acquired a negative reputation. It was rigid, dirty and bleak, whereas plastic signified color, optimism and progress. Brutalist philosophy inverts this entire hierarchy. Concrete becomes the medium of honesty, while plastic appears as kitsch. In other words, cyberpunk and brutalism articulate a sensibility able to critique the plastic mind. The Atlantic Stuff writer Alan Cushing describes Elon Musk's Tesla diner in Los Angeles as smooth and clean. She says, every surface is covered in slick plastic. She evokes retro-futuristic references and curvy linear shape. The restaurant is like those living spaces that we know from classical sci-fi movies. Cushing sees it as an odd fusion of accelerationism and retrofuturism. White plastic furniture and classic rock are presented as emblems of the future. For her, Musk and Trump appear less interested in earnestly trying to imagine a new world than in sloppily recreating an old one. Its aesthetic and ideological orientation stand in marked contrast to the realism and the melancholia characteristic of cyberpunk, grounded in brutalist, concrete environments. Brutalism emerged in England as a counter-reaction to a romantic William Morris revival arts and craft movement. However, a new space-age aesthetics was developed in America at exactly that time. While England's brutalism attempted to erode the arts and craft movement by means of rough concrete, Los Angeles went in another direction. It created LA spacepunk. Modernist designer Bill Curry operated from this city, where design and futurist space engineering have always encountered each other. He invented the stem light lamp that would be extensively featured in the series Star Trek. Star Trek was released in 1966, in the same year in which Ben Hebb published his important book, The New Brutalism in England. Compare this stem light lamp with the Tesla diner stools. Historically, brutalism is egalitarian, utilitarian, and socialist. It wanted to provide affordable housing and public infrastructure. It can also be associated with the ethos of punk, which is anti-authoritarian, anti-establishment, and resistant to centralized power. Unlike retrofuturism, it does not regard oligarchic or authoritarian structures as viable alternatives. This is why brutalist architecture is not fascist. Fascist architecture is typically neoclassical, emphasizing symmetry, columns, and polished stone facades. Nor is brutalism to be conflated with Italian futurism. On the contrary, the futurist celebration of speed, violence, and virile nationalism finds a recognizable echo in contemporary retrofuturism. Look at the Tesla Cybertruck, which has often been described as futuristic. It draws on 1970s science fiction design, but also recalls, in its sharp, angular geometry, the dynamic visual language of futurist Giacomo Balla. Plastic relieves us from our obligations to the earth to place, says Heather Davis in her book Plastic Matter. Plastic is light and suitable for aviation. In films and gaming, one speaks of space plastic. Here, Cyberpunk stands in opposition to the retrofuturism promoted by oligarchs and the political right. Concrete assumes a particular significance. It possesses a contemplative quality because it creates distance. Plastic is verbose, saturated with signifiers and intensely communicative. It attracts the eye, invites commentary, and generates a continuous flow of reactions. Where plastic objects tend towards interior emptiness, concrete conveys solidity and weight. It is anchored in the ground, recalling our material embeddedness and terrestrial condition. Concrete structures cannot simply be transported elsewhere. They bind us to place. Plastic is elusive, whereas concrete endures. To build in concrete is to commit, not only to a form and a material, but also to a place. Against this, plastic corresponds to what Gilles Deleuze calls the objectile, rather than the object. The objectile is an industrially produced technological entity characteristic, paradoxically, of the post-industrial condition. It is mass-produced, yet continuously variable, customized without possessing either essence or permanence. Its fluidity derives from the way each component functions within a flexible, ongoing system.